Hey there. If you want to stay up to date with the latest stories and in-depth analysis, make sure you follow S News to catch this video and all our future updates. Seriously, your support means a lot to us. So don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop a comment below. Thanks for being part of our community. That was a Ukrainian strike on a Russian oil refinery. And let me tell you something, these strikes are working. Just last week, the Russian government announced a ban on gasoline exports because of shortages. Yep, you heard that right. Russia, the country often called a gas station, is now running low on gasoline. So they had to stop exports, and Ukraine is taking full advantage of the situation. Over the past 2 weeks, Ukraine has carried out nightly drone strikes on Russian oil refineries, fuel depots and weapons factories. In fact, last night was one of the worst Russia has experienced. 11 attacks in multiple cities. Airports were shut down, factories destroyed, and refineries set on fire. Let's break down exactly what Ukraine did last night, how Russian citizens reacted, and why Putin is now arresting Russians. In the first clip, you can see a refinery in Sochi completely engulfed in flames. The second clip gives a wider view showing the full extent of the damage, all caused by a $20,000 drone. Billions of dollars in infrastructure destroyed. Just imagine how much oil went up in smoke because Russia couldn't stop a $20,000 drone. As you can see, like President Trump once said, to win a war, you need 3 things: money, money, and money. Every war is an economic war. And these kinds of strikes deal a heavy blow to the Russian economy. Now, as many of you might already know, Russia doesn't really have any major international companies to support its economy. It lacks real innovation. One of the few notable companies founded in Russia is Telegram, but its founder had to leave the country after refusing to hand over protesters' data to the Russian government back in 2014. You just can't have a thriving tech sector or economy if you treat your entrepreneurs like that. So guess what? The only real backbone Russia has is its energy sector. As Senator John McCain once said, Russia is a gas station masquerading as a country run by the mafia. And now, last week Russia announced a gasoline export ban for a month, maybe even 2, to deal with rising local prices and seasonal demand. This ban is in effect until the end of August and might be extended into September. What's worse is that the government publicly admitted they had to do this because of delays in refinery repairs and the impact of European sanctions. Both of those factors have driven up domestic fuel prices. Now the Russian government is trying to force producers and traders to stop exporting oil so prices inside the country can drop. I know some people will comment on this, so let me say it up front. The ban applies specifically to gasoline. Russia still relies heavily on crude oil exports, especially to China, which buys about 47% of Russian exports, and India, which buys around 38%. Those crude shipments are still flowing, for now. But maybe not for long because of secondary sanctions. Over the past 3 days, a bunch of Russian oil tankers have been sitting off the coast of India because Indian companies don't want to risk getting hit by US secondary sanctions announced by President Trump. They're basically telling the Russian ships, we don't want your oil, turn around. But the tankers don't know where to go, so they're just anchored, offshore, stuck. Russia's in a tough spot. They can't afford to stop selling oil. That's how they fund the war. They don't have big international companies they can tax. And that's the real problem. Without money, Putin can't keep the war going. That's why these secondary sanctions might be more effective than the 18,000 other sanctions already placed on Russia.
These secondary sanctions, folks, they're tough. Tougher than anything we've done before. Russia's really feeling the pressure now.
Back to Ukraine's attacks on Russian refineries and factories. Here's an interesting side story from last night. Some Russian TikTok influencers actually went out to one of the burning refineries Ukraine had just bombed and started making TikTok videos in front of the flames.
Let's take a look at the video.
So, shortly after posting their TikTok, these girls were arrested. Turns out, they're minors. But according to Russian authorities, they were charged with sabotage, which apparently now includes recording the collapse of Russia. That all happened just hours before this recording. So far, no official charges have been filed, But the whole thing shows how tightly Russia controls media and free speech. Actually, today, as I'm recording this, Putin just signed a new law. And what does it do? It criminalizes searching for anything he considers extremist. One example? Searching for the name Navalny, the former Russian opposition leader who was imprisoned by Putin and later died in jail. Just searching his name in Russia can get you fined 5,000 rubles. I can't even imagine getting fined just for looking something up. That kind of surveillance is terrifying. In Russia, you don't search the internet searches you. Anyway, back to the Ukrainian strikes. Ukraine didn't just hit an oil refinery. It also targeted a military airport Russia was using to launch attacks on Ukraine. Definitely good news for innocent Ukrainian civilians. Here's the report. Last night, the Seyhad drone airbase in Primorsky, Russia, and a military factory in Penza were hit by drones, along with a few other Russian military sites. That airport was used to store and launch attack drones aimed at Ukrainian cities. After the strike, a massive fire broke out near the airport. You can see the photo on screen. It looks like a mushroom cloud, not nuclear-sized, but still terrifying. Moving on to the electronics factory in Penza. This facility is part of Russia's military-industrial complex. It produces equipment for control systems, aviation, armored vehicles, and even the space industry. It was hit by long-range drones, causing explosions and thick smoke. We've actually got a video of the strike, so let's talk about it. 2. All these strikes, along with the secondary sanctions President Trump is threatening against Russia and its supporters, are putting real pressure on Russia's finances. And at the end of the day, Russia uses that money to build weapons and pay its soldiers. That means if we keep squeezing their cash flow, Ukraine will start seeing real gains on the front lines. Here's what the US ambassador to NATO said about it. Let's listen.
It's clear that President Trump understands leverage better than anyone else. On August 8th, he announced what he called devastating sanctions and tariffs on Russia, and he's not waiting for a ceasefire. So how is Russia funding this war? How are they paying soldiers who are barely trained and likely to die 2 weeks after being deployed? They're offering them $100,000 to join the fight. That's roughly 100 grand in US currency. The bottom line is, Putin needs to sell oil. He sells to China, to India, to Brazil. But now, those countries will start feeling serious consequences in their trade with Russia. Eventually, Russia will be left with no allies, no trade partners, and no money to fund this war.
Now, traditionally, Russia responds to pressure like this with nuclear threats. Since the invasion started, it's been their go-to move. Whenever the West talks about sending tanks or weapons to Ukraine, Russia responds, "Don't do it, we've got nukes." But the truth is, everyone knows Russia isn't going to use nuclear weapons. Their goal is to scare the American and Western public, so politicians lose the support they need to keep helping Ukraine. That's the core of Russia's nuclear threat. It's not about using the bomb. It's about manipulating public opinion. In reality, Russia can't use nukes because Xi Jinping has drawn a red line. If Russia uses any kind of nuclear weapon, China will pull its support. Putin knows this, but he also knows he can still wave the nuclear card around to spread fear and propaganda in the US, and in doing so get the same result without launching a single missile. Ryan Macbeth explained this really well in one of his videos, honestly better than I can. If Russia wants to stop the US from sending weapons to Ukraine, it has two options: launch a direct attack on the US and destroy American factories, which would be a massive escalation. Spread misinformation through the US media saying that continued support for Ukraine will lead to war between America and Russia. That second option, propaganda, is much safer and achieves the same goal. It causes political division in the US, forcing leaders to back off. That's why Russia invests so heavily in disinformation, especially on American social media.
But this time, President Trump shut it down. He made it clear. Talking about nukes isn't something the US will tolerate. We won't ignore it either. Russia's not the only one with nuclear weapons.
No one wants to use nukes. But the point is to keep Russia from going too far with its threats and scaring the American public. Here's Trump talking about it.
Dmitry Medvedev, former president of Russia and now head of a powerful council, made some pretty reckless statements about nukes. When someone mentions nuclear weapons, Trump said, "My eyes light up. I say, let's be careful. This is the ultimate threat. He shouldn't have said that. Trump added that he sent 2 nuclear submarines to the region, just to make sure Medvedev's words are nothing more than words.
Finally, at the end of the video, we want to thank you for listening and encourage you to follow S News and watch future videos. Subscribe, like, and comment. Thanks again.